All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to the Save Our Sites folks. It doesn't even look like we have people viewing yet, but we'll get on here in just a minute. Welcome to the Save Our Sites Roundtable, a very special day for fellow clinical research administrators. Brad, you're a clinical research administrator, right?
Something like that, yeah. I've been called worse.
Did you know that there is a day just for you to recognize all of the trials and tribulations you go through as an administrator?
No, I didn't actually realize that. I feel like that's every day though, right? Like
Yeah.
we're all in the same boat together. But no, it is cool. It is cool. There's an actual, official day, if you will.
Yeah. So take the time away from trying to negotiate that emergency contract and chasing down the 1-year invoice and trying to handle all of the administration challenges that we have to sit back and listen to a very special guest today on SOS, Mr. Kyle Cunningham.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I don't know how special I am, but I certainly feel special being on the program today. So it's good to see everybody.
Kyle, so you are at Greenphire, right?
Yes, sir.
So I got a 2-pronged question for you. Number one is, can you just tell me, for anyone who doesn't know, what is Greenphire? Tell us what about Greenphire. What do they do?
Greenphire, and I'll try to keep this brief because anybody who knows me knows that once I start, I can't stop. But Greenphire, I like to describe Greenphire as sitting really at the intersection of financial services and clinical research. And really, what we've got or what we've created is a technology platform that's really exists or designed to automate processes and connect those processes that are associated with anything tied to like a clinical payment. So ultimately, where we started was with our flagship solution called the ClinCard. And that was really designed to automate the processes associated with clinical patient payments and reimbursements. And then over the years, we've been able to expand that platform across such other functions as clinical site payment automations or invoicing automation for clinical site payments. And then really took that kind of core offering that sits squarely in that, conduct phase of a clinical study and expanded it upstream, in terms of budget and contract workflow development. We've unlocked our own fair market value solution for reference data within that segment of the business and the platform. And then on the patient side, what I like to call our patient convenience-oriented product and solution set, we've really expanded that from where we started with, again, the patient reimbursement automation to a whole, suite of services baked into the technology and surrounding solutions as well that include like tax services, travel services and logistics management. And then most recently, even we've launched our own digital patient experience and mobile app called Greenspace as well. So for us,
wow, I didn't know that one.
Yeah, that was a big deal for us in recent history. So yeah, our product set now, again, it's got the Clin card on the patient payment side. eClinical GPS is our site invoicing automation solution. And Visix is our budget development tool that's integrated with eClinical GPS and harnesses our fair market value data. Connects is our patient travel service that's integrated with the Clin card solution. And then Greenspace is that digital patient experience. And really,
wow,
I would just say all that in a nutshell. And then to kind of close out that little narrative, really the mission of that technology, I think, is what's important. And it's really focused on aiding key areas of value any way that we can to obviously the most important stakeholders across the clinical study. So for patients, the mission, everything we build is to try to find ways that we can to remove barriers to trial participation for the study patient. And then for the research site, it's really about just providing administrative relief any way that we can, cash flow relief, administrative burden relief. And then, of course, for the study sponsors and the CROs, it's about really all of that lending itself to hopefully a more efficient, and faster trial to get qualified therapies to market more quickly, but with the benefit of predictability and control. So that's Greenphire in a nutshell. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So from an administrator who works with a lot of sites across the country, a lot of sites use Greenphire. If you're in this industry, odds are you know Greenphire because they work with some of the largest pharmaceutical company clinical trials out here. I have to say, if you compare a Greenphire experience to a traditional CRO experience as far as payments, it is literally night and day. From my experience, from what I've seen, it feels like Greenphire was the pioneer to do this. Like they were doing this before it was cool. What about the team? How do you feel like when you run into a Greenphire experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been overwhelmingly, positive. And when we've used Greenphire, I think, especially there's a lot of sites out there that don't have, or even if they do have a CTMS, they don't have ways to handle their own payments, especially if you're, younger, greener site. So it's really nice to have that ability. You're not worried about whatever you may be doing, having petty cash around, writing checks, whatever it is. It's nice to be able to put a card in a patient's hand, and that goes a long way towards building trust, getting retention, keeping the patients in your trials. And I honestly, I really love the invoicing feature. I've seen used a little bit here and there. I know we don't want to go like too nuts about features per se, but I know that's been really cool on the studies I've seen it utilized, and I don't think it's utilized nearly enough. But
so, Kyle, we'll get into this in a little bit, but now that we've talked about Greenphire, would you be willing to give a brief introduction about yourself? Maybe even how did you get into Greenphire?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess first and foremost, I'm the chief product officer at Greenphire. So I've been overseeing innovation and product strategy, product management here since I joined about halfway through 2012. So it's hard to believe it's been about 11 years already. Prior to that, I spent my whole career in financial services. So I spent 12 years working at, an investment management space in a number of roles across operations, literally punching keys, wearing a headset for years, managing service teams. And then probably the second half of that chapter into the innovation side and product management. And to be honest with you, I just spent some time overseas. I had come back. I was getting a lot of phone calls, most of which I couldn't delete fast enough. And then I don't know. I just to be totally transparent about it, it's not that my prior career was unfulfilling. I just felt like I wanted to do something that had a little more impact on the world in a positive way. And I think a lot of us kind of strive for that in our careers, in whatever kind of shape or form that takes. But for me, I felt like I wanted to come to a place that was really had a shot at making a difference in a positive way in the world. And certainly a place that I could admittedly exert more influence over and to try to help shape it. So when I got the call about Greenphire, it gave me an opportunity to really address all of that, right? So it was a different industry in the healthcare and clinical research space. So that felt pretty good. A very small, technology startup at the time. I think I was around employee 30 or 35, something like that. We were really small at the time. but this sounds a little bit like cheesy and cliche, but it was one of those stories where I got that call. I like called back the former head of HR at the time. It was like literally a dark and rainy night. And I pulled over the side of the road and we talked for like 45 minutes. And it felt like there was something very positive that was brewing. You know, it's very small, you know, a very narrowly focused product set at the time, but it was all about helping patients, you know, remove barriers to clinical trials and hopefully making it easier on sites along the way. So that was an idea that was attractive to me, and all those other things that kind of wrapped around it. And that's how I found my way. So it was a little bit scary, right? So I was leaving a really big company and a career that was actually moving in the right direction, at least. But to kind of leave all that behind and give it a shot somewhere else was certainly scary, but it was exciting. And I don't know, fast forward 12 years, it's been quite the journey. So when I look back at how far we've come, and maybe a lot of people don't realize this, going from about 30 of us in a little startup environment to, you know, 11 years later being right now, I just from a sense of scale metrics and growth, just we've got hundreds of clients across, you know, direct sites and universities as one channel of customer, but also hundreds of study sponsors and CRO customers as well. We've got tens of thousands. I think the latest is like 40,000-ish research sites and associated personnel and users, and millions of patients that are using our technology in about 80 countries right now. So to have it jump from where it was back then, which is, you know, one product, very domestic, to just international deployments across a widened product set has been awesome and exciting, and everything else that goes with it, kind of a journey. I'm sure I've got the wrinkles and the gray hair to show it, and so do many of us around us. But you know, we've got about 400 or so employees now, and I guess where I would kind of close out that answer to your question, Daniel, is just all the things that got me pumped up to come to Greenphire in the first place about the opportunity to actually help and to do something that hopefully makes the world a little bit of a better place. I feel more bullish on that now than I did then. It's a lot different stakes now. It's a different scale, and there's whole lot more kind of problems and challenges that go with that. I'm sure we'll talk about some of that today, but it does feel like we're doing some good things here, and I'm pretty proud of it and proud of all the colleagues that have been a part of it.
So needless to say, I can say, and I'd love to hear the panel on this, but there's a reason why Greenphire is one of the SOS sponsors, because of your answer right there. The people at Greenphire really do care about our sites. And the reason why you joined Greenphire was because you want to be there to try to make things better for the sites and for the patients and the physicians. So what do you think, team, about the journey, about what you heard about Greenphire and how they're here for our sites?
Yeah, I wanted to add, I think it's awesome. I actually don't use it on every single study. I've used it on a few more recently on one of the ones we're working on, and actually had the experience of submitting a bunch of invoices over the weekend. It was an easy process. Like, it took me a few seconds to submit everything. And so it's been a while since I've used that feature, so I forgot that you had all of that part of was Greenphire. So I'm excited to use it, and I'm glad that we have it for certain studies that we use it on, and it makes that process easier as a site owner. Being able to run my site, it's one less thing I have to worry about, right? Because I can just do it in a few minutes. So thank you for all that you guys are doing for sites.
Well, thanks for that comment. I appreciate that. I can tell you that makes me feel good to hear that, and that it's working. You know, it doesn't always go that way, which I'm sure is a different part of the conversation as well, but you can't learn if you don't, hear the good and the bad as well. But I do think, I'm just jumping back to a comment that you just made, Dr. Fox, about the people that care. I mean, that feels like a whole conversation track in its own right. Everybody cares, or at least I think most people do. Because if you didn't care about what you do for a living, then you're probably not going to be very good at it or go very far. And I feel like Greenphire is a place, and I'm sure you all feel this in your own respective, careers as well, where, caring matters and passion matters. And if you're not, like, you can't learn, or you can't solve problems, I guess is what I would say, unless you learn, right? And you're not going to learn unless you're listening. You're not going to take the time to listen unless you actually care about what it is that you do for a living and the impact it's having, on the market you serve and the environment that you're in. So I don't know if there's some kind of a moral or a takeaway in all of that. It's that, I don't know, there's no room for complacency, right, in solving problems or in innovation. And I don't feel like complacency and Greenphire, are words that go together in the same sentence. And that's always been something that I know that I've enjoyed about working there. We work hard. You never have enough, time in the day to do all the things that you want to do. There's never enough, development resources to build all the things that you want to build fast enough. But like with the time that we have and the people that we have to work with, we do what we can, and everybody cares. And that's what makes it a great place to me.
So it's funny you should say that, because the one thing that we as sites find is, and this is where it was a shock value to me, is we voice our concerns a lot. We say, this is wrong, something's wrong, we need to fix this. But it's very rare that we get a response. So when we're talking about caring, and this goes into what we're talking about, is I was floored with the amount of attention Greenphire took to a site that cared, because it's rare. That doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen nearly as much as it should. And so that's kind of a segue into what we're talking about today is, every time we bring on a sponsor, we say, what do you do to save our sites? That's like test question number one. If you fail that question, you're dismissed. That's, don't need it. But your answer, Kyle, was you listen to the sites and you want to make your products better. I call it feed forward information. I don't believe in feedback, because you really can't change the past. You just go to the future. So that's kind of the title of the talk today, is how do we implement feed forward information to improve what we do? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about. So just kind of to take the temperature of the room, team, have you ever, what are the odds that you actually get a response from voicing your concerns in the industry?
Yeah, slim to none in most cases. It depends. And Greenphire has been a good example of when I've brought things up, someone has reached out. I feel like it's getting more common, but more often than not, I think a lot goes ignored.
Yeah, I will say it depends on what you're requesting and to whom. So, but I will say that, yeah, I mean, a lot of the request just get lost in translation because usually you get told that it's going to be transferred to somebody higher up, but sometimes it just gets there. That's it. Unfortunately, right?
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, it's also sometimes that you don't have access to the right person. So it is give or take, right? So it has a lot of variations. But what I can say is that in relation to Greenphire, I've been using Greenphire since the very first study I ever had. And I really liked it. It's it's a company that, especially in the area where I work in mental health, I have seen it in many studies, and I have seen it flourishing too. So it went from very few features to a lot more that probably I haven't even got the opportunity to experience it all. So it will be lovely to see the new platform, which I'm going to see soon, because I have a new study that has Greenfire. So I'm excited about it. And thank you for being part of SOS, Kyle. It's really an honor for us. And I also have to tell that every single time we have an interaction with somebody from Greenfire, it's been a good experience. We met Joe in one of the conference not so long ago, and we had a very good time with him.
That's really great to hear. I appreciate those comments, Monica, and it's an honor to be part of this as well. I'm just happy to even be invited to this live streaming event today. But I would also say that we do our best to try to keep our finger on the pulse of what matters to sites. At the end of the day, and I'm just kind of jumping back to some key points that were kicked off or touched on a little bit ago. We often build products that get bought or sold directly to, not the sites, right, to the study sponsors or the CROs. But then in turn, though, they're imparted, for lack of a better word, upon the universe of research sites of all shapes and forms and profiles on an international scale. And as I mentioned before, when I was talking about like the scale metrics, when you've got hundreds of clients, right, but tens of thousands of site users who often aren't even the ones paying for it, you've got to find ways to make sure that you keep your finger on the pulse of that. Because if what you're building doesn't actually work and make things better for the lives of research sites, it's all going to fall apart anyway. So we try to hit that in any number of ways. And I'll talk a little bit about the things we do. And maybe I'll touch on a little bit of like, the things that we could do better and have kind of, learned the hard way. But, whether it's just being a part of organizations, like this, like the Society for Clinical Research Sites, like the ACRP, like all these different ways to just kind of like get engaged and in the know. They're so helpful in any number of ways, whether it's conference participations, live events like this, or even access to just market research and surveys. And we do our own, annual, surveys across all kinds of things, right? Surveys, sponsors, patient convenience trends. We do annual site satisfaction surveys. We do, implementation surveys to make sure that how are we, doing well? What are we doing wrong? Where could we improve in that regard? And, but the point I'm trying to get to is that I've always looked at, like that kind of stuff, right? Surveys, they're very good in the sense that you can just hit a lot of people with like the broad swath. And then you get into the, that kind of game or art or science or some combination of all that, where it's like, how many questions can you ask before you start to lose people's interest? But how do you make sure that those questions are pointed enough that it's actually going to give you an answer that you can actually do something with? So that's always like the little bit of the challenge there. But no matter what, you look at those things, or at least I do, as kind of like broad stroke. How do you find little pockets of something, or like, a little like something blinking or going off where you can dig in more deeply? And then when you find those things, you either kind of peel that down to a more concentrated set of questions to really dig in, or most importantly, you find a way to start to talk live. And that's the point I'm trying to get to, that there's never been a replacement in my mind for like live conversations and just discussion, because that's when you can say, oh, I'm not quite sure what you meant. Let's take that a little bit more deeply too. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. We actually, this was a few years ago, we did a site satisfaction survey, and we noticed, for example, that we didn't have as high of site satisfaction as we wanted in some key even geographies. Australia was a little bit low. Poland was a little bit low. So we took the benefit of scheduling some roundtables, some site, full day site workshops with, 20 to 30 sites in Poland and in Australia. And what I found in those events, which was awesome, by the way, me and a couple of colleagues went there, and we found out, there's some stuff that we're doing really well, like to some of even the comments today that it's working. But we also heard the yikes. I'll never forget it too. I got blasted in the face with it, more or less, which was I think it was every site in Australia, and most of them in Poland, gave me some version of they were never trained on our technology, like nothing. And I was just floored by that, because you go back into the earlier days when we're a lot smaller organization, where we could help control a lot of that ourselves, right? Whether we're joining the investigator meetings, and even as we started to get a little bit bigger, we're doing a lot of like pre-recorded trainings and documents that we assume are all getting sent out where they should be. So to go from that to starting to be a lot bigger company now, and then showing up in a different country around the world and having every site in there say, nobody even told us anything. One day this software showed up, we're supposed to use it. We didn't have any background on like what it is, why it's been selected, or how to use it. Like that hurt, and that surprised me. But you know what we did? We took that back to the house, and then we figured out how to embed training right into the product interface itself. And we're still doing that. We're not done yet. We've been doing that for years, like building introductory, tutorials. Hey, welcome to this product. Here's how it works. Here's what it was designed to do. Here's why you have it. And then building out like the task or feature like specific engagements, like the knowledge bases and repositories. And now we're getting more feedback about, how that's helping to improve, and, there's more that we can do with it. So I guess the point is nothing will ever replace a live discussion. And often what you get in those live discussions is constructive criticism as well, about not just what you're doing right, but like what you're doing wrong or not doing at all. And Dr. Fox, I know that's what really served as the kind of like, foundation of our relationship several months back. And you're right. It started out as, I think, a LinkedIn post where you had some questions, and then I reached out to you, but that quickly like blossomed into some other things. And some of those discussions even included, Kyle, I think you guys are doing some great things, but here's something that you got a little bit sideways on. But again, and if you recall, that stung me a little bit. And I think it's a good thing when you get stung, because if it doesn't hurt, it means that you don't care. And back to that. And then if you care and we can talk this out, then maybe we can figure out how to do something even better.
That's actually a really good point, Kyle. And this is a lot about getting that information from the sites, something that it's obviously you need to do like a self-reflective exercise to see, like, I want to incorporate this to make myself better. How do you, as an administrator, manage or handle those slaps in the face or those stings?
Finding my unmute button. How I manage them is first accept that they're real. It's a very good question. And my off the cuff response is just, when you hear something like that, my first reaction is just, ouch, right? Because it's like nobody tries to do something wrong, or at least I hope not, right? So there's nobody, I would hope, in any kind of organization, particularly one where you literally by design, by trade, by the very reason you exist is to solve problems. Nobody wants to hear that they built something that didn't solve a problem the way that you thought it did. So you have to you want that information, like you're almost hungry for it. And then what you need to do is you feed that in to the innovation, process, and then make sure that, in my opinion, it's always get more brains involved, the better. Try to dig in, ask more questions, and truly try to understand not just the problem itself, but like the root cause of the issue, and even more importantly, the processes that are underlying it. So you can figure out, even if you have to take a step back and kind of rethink it, redesign it a little bit, how can we actually solve the problem? So I guess that's my long-winded way of saying, when I hear the bad, like I want to dig into what was the process or like the pain point that we were trying to resolve for in the first place. Where did we go wrong, and how can we go right? And some of those things we're talking with you and your colleagues through right now, for example. But I guess that's my short answer, or rather long-winded answer. Does that make sense so far?
No, total, and very humble. I think humble is a really good way of saying it. Is just, this is good. I'm glad that someone's telling me about it because they care. I always say it's whenever like someone has something in their teeth, and it takes some guts to say, hey, you got something in your teeth there, buddy, because they say it out of care. They really want you to, not have something in your teeth. It's similar in an analogy, although I'm not saying Greenphire has spinach in their teeth, but it's just a different comparison.
If I did right now, you would tell me, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, only a good friend would be that candidly honest. By the way, Monica, I just realized, did you intentionally wear green to a Greenphire?
Yes, I did. It was intentional.
Yeah, so it could be officially like National Greenphire Day at this rate, because I think Greenphire does celebrate the clinical research administrator with almost everything that they do.
Yes.
Chris, I haven't heard much from you, and I know you're a finance guy.
So,
what do you think about the process?
So I actually have a question, but first I'm going to say, sites love working with Greenphire, as Dr. Fox and Brad have pointed out. Years and years ago, Dan, who's not here, him and I believe, had a call with a representative from Greenphire about sites, because at the time, this was many years ago, probably around 8 years ago, if I had to guess. And at the time, the only way sites would work with Greenphire was through sponsors. And at the time, Dan and I offered a consulting service to sites, and many of them were interested in, we don't want to pay cash, we don't want to write checks, what are our other options? So we spoke with a rep at Greenphire, and at the time, they were really outside the limits of what sites were willing or could pay to use Greenphire independently as sponsors. I believe that's changed, though. I'm really asking a question here. Are you more accessible to individual sites as an offer for those
Absolutely.
who don't want to pay with cash?
So in terms of the Greenphire customer base, we work with everybody. So we've got a direct channel where we sell not our full platform today, but certainly the patient engagement and convenience solution set. We sell directly to sites and universities. We've really expanded that to hundreds of site and university clients, and now we're actually starting to take that internationally as well, not just in the United States. So we work with everybody. We work with sponsor CROs and with sites directly as well.
Wow. Talk about growth and scaling, Kyle. So you had an example of the training. You went somewhere, someone complained, and you implemented it. How long does it take you to implement these recommendations?
That's a great question, and it depends. I mean, here's just one of the challenges, and I may have touched on this before, with getting larger as an organization. When you've got hundreds of clients and tens of thousands of users, and you're deploying it in almost every country that's relevant to clinical research just across the planet, there are a lot of asks, right? So it's different than it was like when I first joined, right? When you don't have a lot of money and you're basically making negative margin, and it's just at that time you're just trying to hone in on things and find something that works and take that forward and grow with that. Now it's like you've got multiple products, you've got all kinds of different customer profiles and user profiles as well. So when you hear opportunities for change or betterment, you've got to really focus on what the hard part is. I would say the biggest challenge of product management and why we exist is to prioritize. How do you prioritize the investments based on that combination of value versus effort? So it's just there's always a bigger list and a backlog of things that you want to do versus like what you can do in the real world. So it's always just trying to find, the things that are going to create the most value for the most people that you can get out the door the fastest. So it's a hard question to answer because it really depends on what it is and how important that is and how many people it's going to actually help. Right. So when it was something like the training, I mean, that becomes a no-brainer almost, because it's like, wow, if the very things that we've put all this energy and investment into to actually help change like the industry and make all these things better, hopefully get sites paid faster, hopefully it makes it easier on them, get patients more engaged and remove these barriers. If people don't know how to use it, well, we better figure that out as part of the one through end that's near the top. So you know what I mean? So if it's something that's lower effort, high value, those are always going to make the cut right away. But for me, it's trying to find the balance of just not always working on the biggest, baddest, dirtiest, heaviest projects. It's getting through those big blocks that are going to like move the ship forward, but also like looking for opportunities to weave in, the kind of smaller effort, higher value stuff too, and kind of the spaces between the spaces. So it really just comes down to prioritization. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I agree completely. Of course, it's going to determine exactly how much effort it's going to take based off of the ask. Like if I said, Kyle, just scrub Greenphire, I don't like it, make a whole new platform, that may take a lot longer than if I just said, hey, you think you could fix this login structure, or you could add this training, or tweak this here and there, or you have a punctuation mark error. I mean, so that makes total sense.
You want trends too, and you don't want to like something else we try to be cognizant of, because we haven't addressed every question or ask that's ever been raised. That's very, very hard, if not impossible to do, but you want to be aware of the trends, right? And the ones that have been kind of hanging out there the longest. So like, again, it comes back to, we want to do everything for everyone, but nobody in any business, you can't do all that. So you're kind of like making trade-off decisions all the time. And hopefully we make more good decisions than bad ones. And I think that we are, based on, how we've been able to grow, over the years. But I also really want to be cognizant of what are the asks that have been kind of hanging out there for, a couple of years, even longer. Those are the ones you want to make sure that you're not losing sight of, so that you're not just innovating, but you're staying contemporary as well. And that your partners and their business partners feel the same way. So that's something that you just have to do, and just keep forcing yourself to have those hard conversations about, what's next and what's most important right now at any point in time.
So go ahead, Monica.
Sorry, I would like to add to that, I mean, obviously it's difficult and like Kyle said, nearly impossible to answer all the questions. But when you answer a question that makes such a big difference for one group of clinics or a group of organizations in research. That's basically all. I mean, it's like answering all the questions because it's a big impact out there. So helping the sites to get the payments faster and through a easy platform, I mean, it's just mind blowing.
Yep. And sometimes I think, Kyle, there's a difference between your mission and your objectives or your asks. So I know that Greenfire's mission, for example, Greenfire, their mission may be to help to get site payments fast in a platform that helps sponsors to do efficient workflows or businesses. But to do that, you have eClinical GPS, you have all of these different offerings, you have all of these different objectives that you are developing with an intention to meet a mission.
Yeah, and I would just add too, it's just that landscape continues to change and evolve as well. And it's just, so on one hand, for example, the one of our primary missions at Greenfire is patient convenience, right? As I mentioned before, what can we do to just remove barriers to entry and ongoing trial participation? And what we realize is that, first of all, you've got to like align with the regional requirements and preferences that can vary quite drastically, like all over the planet. So we never want to have just the audacity, if you will, or the arrogance to think that one solution we build is going to work for everybody, because people are human beings and people have different preferences, and the places in which they reside have different requirements. And my Lord, if you look at the international landscape, not at just patient preference, but even like regulatory environment, it is quite diverse as it relates to tax, as it relates to data privacy, as it relates to clinical regulations, as it relates to financial regulations. And that doesn't even have anything to do directly with just how a human being says, here's what makes sense for me. So like our mission in that regard, and this is where it becomes a challenge as well, is to always try to introduce the benefit of flexibility for the patient, right? So they, at the end of the day, have the right to choose. And we've got a menu that's wide enough that actually makes sense for them. And sometimes it's about getting paid in this mechanism versus that mechanism versus that mechanism. Sometimes it's about, well, I want to get paid like this, but I don't like the data that needs to be collected to actually enable that. So I'm going to shift to plan B. So we continue to try to invest in just making the menu of choice as deep and wide as we can, and giving different, access points for, different types of patients all over the place, whether that's, geographic location, whether that's age, whatever the demographic is, just to make sure that we've got an experience that makes sense in every different way, whether it's mobility, whether it's, web-based, whether it's neither, but there's still a way to have like that connective tissue. And then what I was going to say is, one of the challenges then becomes, how do you introduce ultimate patient flexibility and engagement without actually creating more work for the site? In fact, ideally, you're doing that while making it easier for the site. And that's where it can become even more challenging. And I'll tell you maybe a couple of examples of that, if I may, just to keep going down that talk track. One would be, and this isn't more about creating more work, it's just an interesting point. When we rolled out our GreenSpace digital patient experience, and one thing we really wanted to do was to make sure it had the functionality to enable, receipt-based capture, and like to integrate that with the site experience for, that workflow, that adjudication or approvals management workflow. But it was just interesting to me because there's a lot of feedback or discussion was about, man, the benefit for the patient. And of course there's that, like you want to put a patient in a scenario, particularly in a, not in the States where reimbursements are more commonplace than a stipend based environment. You want to give them tools and capabilities to scan, right? Because nobody wants to like have a pocket full of receipts. I hate that when I go on a business trip. But it's even worse. It's when you got to like come home and scan them all. So to me, it was like, yeah, the receipt capture on the phone, or, that's the cool part for the patient. But, it's even more important, I think, it's making sure that they don't show back up to the clinic and say, here you go, deal with these. So it's things like that where you always have to consider not just the patient experience, but the site experience on the other side. Another good, just kind of quick little story that I've told before, so hopefully it's not too redundant, but it was a powerful moment in not only just my career, my life. When I was on an overseas trip with my boss, Jim Murphy, our CEO, And we were going from, we had some, man, it's terrible now I think back about the planning for it. We had a meeting in Biberach, Germany, and we had to be like, wake up and get to Basel, like late morning or something, whatever. So we had a train booked, and we got to the train station, and like no one there spoke English. Everybody spoke German. It took us forever to realize that we were booked on the wrong train, and like the right train was over 100 kilometers away. We had no idea what to do. Like literally, we were complete idiots. Like we left the train, we're looking around for anybody that spoke English. We walked out. We're just like literally standing in the parking lot doing circles. We saw a taxi. We were able to communicate where we needed to go, and it was just almost a comedic, like Steve Martin movie or something. We 800 euros later, we had stopped at ATM machines. We actually got in a ferry for a while, and we ended up making it to the meeting right on time. But the point of the story is that here are two guys that had access to like basically every resource available, and we still barely made it work. And we had that mutual thought just as we talked it out, sitting in the back of a taxi and talking about it later, about if it's that hard for us, how hard must it be for a patient trying to traverse the international landscape, right, without nearly the resources that we had access to, and we still barely made it work. So like, I'm not saying that was the birthing thought of everything that we did, but it certainly helped to reinforce our need to almost double down on like that side of our business as it related to like the travel and logistics management, making sure that as we built that deeper, more localized experience into the patient, kind of component of that we fed that back into the site experience as well, even from a support perspective as well. So I guess my main point there is you've always got to think of like the patient experience and the site experience in tandem so that they don't get too, separated from each other, because you need them both to work.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when the site is working properly, the experience of the patient is much better, right? It's like a organic situation, and the same thing happens. I mean, if the site is working, if the site is performing well, and things are much easier for the site, then they can focus on that relationship with the patient, and they can also help the study grow faster, right? So at the end of the day, in either direction, the patient will be getting benefits out of it. I mean, if the drug works and if the drug is being something that has shown really good results, and if the site is performing well also, and the study is going, I mean, it's not having as much challenges, which is, I mean, obviously that's an utopia. But if that happens, then at the end of the day, the outcome is going to be also reflecting on the patients, because if the drug is available for them and if it works in the study, then that's it, right? So that's what we're part of research, because we want to have that outcome out there. We want to see it.
And so do you have ways, Kyle, to listen to all of your stakeholders? You have like little feelers out to patients, site sponsors, and CROs?
Yeah, we do. We certainly try. So we have, all those engagements that I described earlier, as far as like the survey mechanisms and the groups that we're a part of. We partnered closely with Syscripts as well, and to try to give us more access to the patient voice, the site voice, and all those ways I was talking about before, and certainly the sponsor and CRO communities as it relates to the roundtables, the surveys, the one-on-one conversations. It's also interesting too that the bigger we've gotten, we've got our little internal, squads, as we call them as well. We've got the sponsor squad, the CRO squad, the site squad, where we're starting to get more and more employees that actually came from those backgrounds as well. And now we got our little hubs within our own four walls, so to speak, that we can use to bounce ideas off of, even sometimes before we take them out to the masses. So that's been pretty interesting for us as well. But yeah, I'm also thinking about, I can't help but go back to some of what Dr. Fox, our conversations have been, lately as well. No matter like what we talk about, I feel compelled to go back to the power of the one-on-one conversations. And just, there's another good example though, of just how, through some back and forth that you and I had, and then even something that I thought that we had solved, right? When we talk about, our site payment solution. And it was just so interesting how you helped me to realize that we did. You solved this problem over here about really good at aggregating and kind of normalizing liability data that gets like presented to a study sponsor or a CRO that helps them understand how to pay quickly. And then you do enable them to pay quickly, and they do, and that's great. But man, look at all the steps you've created over here with like some additional reconciliation that's required. So I think that, there's another thing that I'm just so keenly aware of right now. And I'm trying to tie that back to your question about how we access all those groups. I think that what we've done well is used market research and connectivity with sites and sponsors to help kind of figure out where we need to solve. But what we can do a better job, and we're really invested in that now as well, that as we build those things all along the way, we keep those same groups involved, right? So it's not like, wow, we got a problem, let's talk about that problem. And then we go build something and say, hope it worked. We've done a little bit too much of that at times. And I think this is now an opportunity where we have to get that right. And you're pointing out some examples of that. And some of the examples that I'm kind of changing the topic a little bit that you've helped me to understand is about the swivel chairing still that the sites are forced to do. And when you've got, when I first joined Greenphire, I just recall like taking stages or being at conferences and everybody was talking about an average of like 9 or 10 technologies that sites have to work with. And now it sounds like it's more like 20 plus. And on like the larger end, we're talking 50 plus as well. So there's a little bit of a need at all times to figure out, all right, you can't be everything to everyone, right? Best of breed is important. But of course, if I'm a site, and maybe I'll turn this into a question for you, I would assume that you want the most that you can get out of a one-stop shop, but you have to recognize that you don't want that to be to a fault. So like great solutions have to play well with others. Interoperability has to become like a centralized focal point of good solution providers. And Daniel, that's what you've been talking to me about in some cases as well, which is how do we take these good things that we've done and make them even better by reducing the need to go over here or over here or over here in parallel? Is that a fair way to mention that?
Yeah. And I had a little bit of an epiphany as you were talking. We were talking about choice for the patient for stipends. Choice for, sometimes there are certain patient demographics that can't quite do eClin cards. They might want to check, or they may need to go to a bank account, or they may need something. I think that could be a really good parallel with sites, especially with finance and payments. Prime example, and it's 50-50. There are some sites that live by email. Please email me everything. That's how I organize my life. It'd be nice to have remittances emailed because they do that. And there are other sites that say, I don't want another email in my life. It's almost full. I'd rather go to a portal. I just want to go to the portal and get my remittance. But same thing, choice. If there's a choice where it's like, okay, we could either go into the portal, select email me the remittance or don't email me the remittance. It's that kind of a choice. And the fact that you listen and offer that choice that could not only help in the demographics of patient populations and stipends, but also for sites and payments and payment reconciliations.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to think of a polite and appropriate way to address some certain scenarios as well. Look, at the end of the day, one thing that I'm cognizant of as well is like, given all the growth that we've had and hopefully the mainly positive impact that we've had, is like different competitive solutions that have popped up, right? And I think it would be a mistake for a solution provider to be, almost like not to take that like to a negative place. Because for me, I feel like competition is a good, healthy dynamic for the marketplace as well. Having competition forces everybody to be better as well to solve even more problems, right? So like for me, on the patient side of the house, flexibility is key, right? Everybody knows who understands Greenphire that we started out as the Clin Card company, right? It's our flagship product. A reloadable debit card is like the financial instrument that is literally still embedded to this day into the name of the product. But the product itself is so much more than that, to the point where we may end up actually like rebranding it, because it's no longer just about cards. It's about cards that do serve a place. And we've removed so many fees over the years that used to be there when it was originally founded, to try to peel that back to kind of just the bare essentials that go with that type of an instrument. But then you realize when you look again across that landscape of regionalized requirement and preference, A card doesn't solve for everybody. It's a good instrument in the sense that it's a really good tool for the unbanked. Even when not unbanked, when banked, it's a good kind of like one for all kind of a mechanism, but it's not good enough. And that's why we've introduced more real-time regional payment rails for like direct deposit in a bank account, because it's a better solution for the bank. Digital payment modalities, e-wallets, virtual cards, and we're continuing down that frontier as well to make sure that we don't have one thing or even two things. We've got a menu of opportunities that appeals to the masses, because at the end of the day, they should just be able to say, that's the one I want, and then we can make it work. And on the site side as well, we don't see it much different, right? Sites have commonalities and they have differences. And like I said before, if you look across the landscape of sites internationally, there are a lot of like common challenges, right? Sites aren't getting paid fast enough for the most part across the planet, and they want to get paid faster, right? Sites have that same interoperability challenges. A lot of sites have to work with too many systems. So how can we create that more kind of open marketplace through our own continued investments in our API program to make sure that we've got, single sign-on or beyond that to make less swivel chairing as possible. But then again, you get through some commonalities, and a lot of sites are different too. Like the contracting dynamics change region to region, country to country. It becomes less apples to apples and more one to many or many to many. So we're always trying to make sure that we understand not just the common challenges, but like the variance and challenge as well, and bake that into our solution environment as well, so that it's as flexible as it needs to be to support all the stakeholders involved. I feel like I can keep going on that front, but I don't want to chew up the rest of your event just with my
this is the
long-winded
showcase, but that right there is a perfect example. And I would imagine that almost every single one of those examples that you just provided was a direct result of observation with your stakeholders. And that tells me you are like the master of listening and implementing.
I appreciate the comments. I don't know that I would consider myself a master of anything, but I do think that our at Greenphire, our heads are in the right place, right? Of course, we're a for-profit organization, right? So we are trying to, everything that we are doing, we need to make sure that we keep the lights on ourselves. So and I think we've been doing well in that regard, just given like how much growth that we've had. But like I said before, we're not just about like the latest and greatest, hey, look at this flashy new thing that doesn't add real value. I mean, everything that we're doing, we're trying to actually help. I mean, that's why we all joined this company in the first place, and still very much the driving force is, why do it if it's not going to help like people and make the world a better place? I do want to talk more about kind of the site workflow optimization piece, which I do think is, central. Brad, I see you posting a lot, right? And your posts are always insightful and thought-provoking, which is the point as a thought leader too. And I've seen some recently where you talk about just almost like the irony of fair market value, right? Doesn't feel very fair when somebody else holds all the cards. And for me, I mentioned this already. We've unlocked, as most people realize, like within our budget development tool, what we believe is the industry leading contemporary fair market value data set, just because we've done so many site payments that we've got all this data. So it's looking for ways to just say, well, how do we bring that to life, since it is so geographically diverse and so contemporary? And there's such an opportunity there to unlock that data, not just for the sponsor and CRO community, who often have access to the data, right? Because whatever tool they're using, whether it's contemporary or not, they're paying for it, right? And sites are kind of like, yeah, but what do I have? So if there's a way for us to unlock that offering, at the site level, but based on your own consumption needs, do you see that as a good opportunity, or have you seen any movement in that regard?
No, I mean, I've talked to some folks that have, had the idea or working in that direction. I mean, I think that anything would be an advantage for sites who oftentimes literally hold no real starting point other than their own, right? So that's not, even that is not fair market value, right? That's just your own internal historical data, which, as far as I can tell, varies as the definition of fair market value.
Yeah, I could write I did a whole podcast on that. It's a big passion of mine too. And I agree. The one thing that we're finding is the transparency. I mean, it's sponsors and CROs saying this is fair market value, and it's, well, how'd you get to it? Well, we can't show you. You're just gonna have to trust us.
Yeah, I do.
Really?
I like the idea of
mean-
there being a third party in between who,
Yeah,
can
someone we
help
can both point
manage
to.
that. I
you
mean, I
know?
guess that's fair. I mean, obviously they may have something to gain from that too, so it could get sticky. And I don't know that I have a perfect answer for that. You know what I mean? But I think it's obvious that sites are at a severe disadvantage. Which, if they're at a disadvantage, it's not fair, right? There's nothing fair about it if we have way less information than the sponsor does.
So that's actually a whole other topic. I have an interesting thesis on that. We only have a few minutes left, and Kyle, just kind of on a like overarching, nothing specific, but December 2022, there were a lot of predictions that said 2023 would be the beginning of the year of the site. That's what they said. And I think that we're seeing a lot of that coming together. A lot of the pieces, there's brand new conferences coming out. SOS is not the only one. There's a lot of conferences coming. What do you see is going to be really hot topics to have to look at and address in the next 2 to 5 years?
I mean, that is a very powerful and loaded question. And what I see is us having more opportunity to dig more specifically into the patient and site experience as well. Everything that we're talking about is just a little bit of scratching the surface of really digging in to solve those problems as well. So we see a much deeper focus in our regard on that patient journey and that patient engagement as well. There's a number of things that we're working on right now to try to bring sites and patients more closely together. Even in support of what I would call the hybrid trial environment. So coming out of like COVID, all that you would hear about is just decentralized trials and that being the future. And I think that we see it differently, and I think other folks are starting to see that differently as well. And it's really about building bridges and balancing that that world where sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. So the more that we can do to open that up and ensure that whether you would enjoy or need the benefit to be able to participate from the comfort of your home, and how do you actually build the bridges to make sure that the sites can offer that support and the kinds of tools to enable that. And I also see from the site side, ultimately, that it's interesting if you take a step back. I think Ken Getz rolled out a report earlier this year that said there's a lot of things that have actually gotten worse over the last few years. When you look at just study startup and, budget management and, payment services and all kinds of different operations, oriented services, they've actually gotten worse. But at the same time, it feels like sites are also saying they've never felt more optimistic about, what solutions are coming out simply because sponsors and CROs are taking the time to ask. Do you guys feel that way as well? So it feels like there's a reckoning that's taking place, I guess is my point, where sponsors realize they're not going to be very successful without sites that are actually put in a position to be successful. So that entire like sponsor of choice, kind of mentality, which is, it sounds weird, but I think it comes from a place of awareness and caring, which says we had better be focused on making things and making sites' lives easier, just like we need to focus on making patients' lives easier, or we're all going to fail. So I expect a lot more investment into site workflow optimization, interoperability, and deeper ways to build bridges between sites and patients.
That's a good point. So, Brad, Monica, have you seen any kind of a shift in the winds as far as site advocacy, someone listening to the site accommodation in the past, since you've been doing this?
Yes, I have seen. Yeah, I actually been working with two pharmaceutical companies that have been nothing but amazing with us as a site, and that have been hearing us, have been having meetings with us to improve things at the site. And I mean, I'm very optimistic that that's going to continue being the trend. I don't know how to call it. Yeah, and that also, I mean, obviously there are many factors that are pushing this too. I think also the fact that now the FDA is pushing to diversity, that's going to be another more component for the sites, and the sponsors. I mean, in order to get the drugs approved, now they have to have this component, right? The diversity. So that's something that sites have to be. That's another component for the sites. Another part that is going to be I mean, kind of a heavy load, right? Because at the end of the day, who's gonna be doing the recruitment if not the site? And also, because of this, well, and a lot of other factors, I think that's pushing this to be happen much faster.
What about you, Brad? Have you seen any shift? I think you're part of the shift.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely hearing and we're seeing, I think, people being more willing to engage in these conversations. I mean, I don't know if we've seen any kind of like real strong movement yet at this point. I think it's still sort of in the like building up process, maybe. But I mean, to Kyle's point earlier, I mean, I think I certainly have like more optimism now than maybe I have in the past. You know, chalk it up to all the whining and complaining, you know, I've done over the last couple of years. But, you know, ultimately, yeah, I think it's trending in the right direction. And look, it's not even about any one of us, right? It's about all of us.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's going to take the whole ecosystem to really come together. But, you know, I think maybe it'll come out with a little bit more equity as we keep moving forward.
Yep. Well, we have 1 minute, Kyle, and we'll wrap up real quick. Why don't you go ahead and any last words you want to tell the audience?
I feel like I need to say something profound. I would just say, listen, I appreciate the opportunity to be on today. I've really enjoyed, first of all of your posts that I do read, and I look at them as constructive opportunities to actually, you know, build some cool stuff. And Dr. Fox, I've enjoyed all of our discussions over the last several months. And again, what started out as a question online turned into just deep working sessions about actually how to improve, which is what the whole point is. It's why I got into this business in the first place, probably why just about every colleague that I have and in any solution, you know, kind of environment is trying to do the same thing. So I guess I would say that I think we just need to keep having conversations. We need to all recognize that no one's got all the answers. And if we can just kind of come together, to your point, Brad, and say it's all of us, it's not any one of us. It's me, it's our competitors, it's you, all of us just kind of highlighting and crystallizing what problems exist. I mean, the more people working on these things, the more likely we're going to figure them out. So I just think we all need to keep talking and accept that we can do better. And there you go.
Yep. And Kyle, I have to say that I really, really appreciate Greenfire's willingness to listen to a LinkedIn loudmouth and to actually create some positive change out of just sincere concern over trying to make things good.
You bet. So now I've got one under my belt. Then I'm going to do it again.
There you go. Yeah, we'll do it again. We'll have you on the podcast sometime. Monica, Brad, any last words?
No, man, just keep. I think we just need to keep rocking and rolling, and you know, we appreciate the support from Greenphire, and yeah, that's it, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for exposing yourself also to uncomfortable conversations.
You're very welcome.
All right, everyone. So www.saveoursites.com, Save Our Sites Conference, February 2nd, 2024. Thank you, Greenphire, for being one of our Save Our Sites Alliance partners, Alliance sponsors. And now, after having this conversation, I can see exactly why they're on the team. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.